Okay, so that works, great. And let me do the check-up here. Yeah, dzień dobry. I don't speak Polish, I'm very sorry, but I will do my presentation in English. But you all can now put in the plug if you need some translation in Polish. So thanks for having me. It's actually a pleasure to speak about the topic of disinformation on an international conference, because I think still we should really think that disinformation is something that just affects national states. This is actually which is having a huge impact of our global democracy, and especially what you can see nowadays happening in Europe. So who am I? I work for the Amadeo Antonio Foundation. We are based in Berlin, but we have like different places all over Germany. We're focusing mainly on the perspective of those who are affected by hate speech, by discrimination, and all other forms of human dignity. The name of Amadeo Antonio, I just want to repeat it one more time. It's very important because he was one of the first victims of right-wing violence after the German reunification. And we want to encourage and promote local actors to shape a civil society and create a democratic civil society. The project I work in is called Firework. So we are an educational project for young people and educators. We get financed by the German Ministry of Justice, and our aim is actually to empower people to deal with such racist, anti-Semitic, xenophobic, and other hateful discourses on the internet, but of course also offline, because this is probably what we learned during the last days, that when we talk about online, we also have to talk about offline. Our activities are that we do workshops and we train actually trainers and educators. So we have trainers all over Germany, like even in the smallest village, who can give trainings on disinformation, conspiracy narratives, and hate speech. Yeah, so when we talk about media literacy, it is important to kind of bring in those 4 pillars. Because when we do want to shape also a democratic civil society in the digital space, it is important to reflect on their own behavior at first. So we have to understand that actually when we are online, that we create a space that we actually attend and participating in society and in democracy also online. So what we do is that we always reflect and ask questions. So what are you actually doing online? Then, of course, when we talk about disinformation, we have to recognize how disinformation works. And maybe just a side note, we are not using the term fake news anymore. We actually go for the term disinformation because fake news has been used, especially by a very far-right Donald Trump. I'm just saying him now as an example. So this word has been like very misused, so that's why I talk about disinformation. When we recognize, or we want to recognize disinformation, we also have to understand what kind of strategies are actually behind this. And then, of course, it's good to know what is this disinformation, how does it work, but then it's also very good and important to make the next step. Okay, now we know it, we analyze the problem, and what can we do about it now? So actually, how can we become active? And then, when we move in the digital space and we want to teach media literacy, we should never forget about this, digital self-protection and self-defense. So how actually do I put my settings that not everyone can see what I'm doing there, or whatever. I brought you some numbers. They're actually from a German study, but I thought it might be also interesting for you. But I also think we can really adapt it on various kind of countries. So there was this research made in 2020, like in the middle of the pandemic, that 76% of the 14 to 24 years old are confronted with fake news, disinformation, at least once a week. And I think this number is kind of a big one. During the pandemic, the number doubled. So here we also see how the pandemic had a huge influence on disinformation. Also, it says that 85% of young people are pretty sure and they demand that the topic of disinformation should be actually taught in school. As far as I can say, in Germany, it's still not a thing. Like in Germany, in school, we still don't talk about disinformation as a problem as we should do. This research also came up with a very interesting point, and I want to strengthen it. That's why it's this one. It's that 74% see the biggest problem that actually older people, like not the young people, we always focus on the young, that actually the young, older people are reproducing disinformation at its most. And this is interesting because of course, it's important to talk with young people about it, and I love my workshops and I love my job, but also in Germany, we don't have any offers for older people. Like I talk 50 plus, right? So actually when we talk about political education and civic education, we just forget completely a big target group, which also is voting every 4 or 5 years. And it's like, so this is something that we think about. So yeah, but I come back later to some project ideas. And also what is very important, because when we think about disinformation, we have, for example, politics who have a responsibility, but we also have us as users, we are online every day, but then also we have journalists who sometimes actually reproduce disinformation. And then they are like, oops, it just happened. But they should do it clear and transparent. Yeah, it happened. We are very sorry. And also kind of open up the space why it happened to them. So then people would understand, actually disinformation is something that affects everyone and like a lot of spaces. I hope I'm not speaking so quick. Okay, I'm a bit excited. All right. Yeah, when we talk about disinformation, I also would like to bring up the term digital violence, because disinformation should actually also be treated as something that really violates and hurts. So we have to be sure that we cannot separate anymore online and offline, you know. We actually have to think it together, because now we are here offline together, and you probably have your phone, so you're online at the same time. So actually the spaces are actually becoming one. And when we talk about disinformation, we have to talk about violence, because behind disinformation, it's always ideologia. I pronounce it now in a funny way, sorry. And also organization. So, and also disinformation often are kind of connected to conspiracy narratives. And when we think about conspiracy narratives, actually the topic of anti-Semitism is not far anymore. So we really have to understand that disinformation affects a lot of topics. Then disinformation, which is kind of a good news maybe, is that we still have a very minority, but they are very loud. So disinformation, it's still not that everyone is believing in disinformation, but the minority who is actually reproducing and really in this rabbit hole, this is how we call it, they are very loud. Then, of course, when we think about those big companies like Meta, before it was Facebook, then algorithm is something we also have to be aware. I mean, if you really go into this rabbit hole, the way out of the rabbit hole is harder when once you're in. So, yeah, I'm just checking the time. Yes. Broadly speaking, disinformation is actually the intentional spread of untrue information. So there is actually, behind disinformation is the intention to mislead and to have a lack of truth, and then also not just having a lack of truth and having the intention to mislead, but also to construct your own truth, right? And also claiming it, that this is my truth. So, I mean, you might heard already that that sometimes people say that, but in my truth, it is like this. So this is something where you always have to be already carefully. Yeah, and it's false and wrong, and the information is generated to harm a person, social group, organizations, or even a country. The difference to disinformation, I just brought it up here, is misinformation. So a misinformation is not that it's actually made to mislead. Sometimes it just happened because you did very bad research, or you read something wrong and you didn't check it, and then actually we create misinformation. So it's also wrong, but it doesn't have this kind of political level of you have a really bad intention to spread a lie. And then also, when we talk about disinformation, we have to talk about malinformation. And malinformation is a bit tricky, because malinformation is actually taken from a real information, but then it has the intent to harm and to kind of make a strategy. So they take it true information, but then they take it, for example, in a different context, in a new context, or they make up some story before, or they make up some story behind. So kind of the malinformation, it's very tricky because it's truth-based, but it still also is used to harm organization, a country, or a person. So here I have like just to collect what I have been told about. So disinformation actually is moving in between, but it has a very strong power, especially because it has an agenda in the back. Yeah. So war of information, this is something we hear quite often, of course, in the recent month. I just brought, like, I tried to make a picture of like little stairs. So when we talk about misinformation, it's just something untrue. It's not true, and that's it. Then actually, when the intent to mislead comes in, then we are already on the level of malinformation or disinformation. Then, nowadays, or we could observe it in the last years, is that disinformation, actually, they kind of wear a dress nowadays, that they look like very proper journalist work, that they have this very fancy design also. So it's also not so easy all the time to understand, is this now a disinformation? So it kind of became professional, and we call it pseudo-journalism. And then the last stage that we observe is the state actors. So when it actually turns into propaganda, because the state actors and the state institutions are also reproducing disinformation all the time. Yes, disinformation is nothing new in history. So I brought up 3 examples, and actually here was supposed to be number 4, but I will explain it to you. So I found actually a good example about disinformation in the year 1789. Marie Antoinette, that was one of the first disinformation campaigns we had in our history, because she said, if they have no bread, let them eat cake. This is what she was accused that she said it. But actually, it wasn't true. It was decolonized, and it was passed on. And still people repeating it over years, even it's been like quite a while ago. Then in the 50s, when Germany was still divided into 2 parts, the GDR actually had a problem with potato beetles. Like they had a pandemic kind of epidemic of potato beetles. And they actually blamed the American planes for it, because there was this Luftbrücke. You know, the Americans came and brought stuff to the west of Berlin. So at that time, it fit very well that they said it was America who brought in those beetles. Yeah. In 2016, actually, a reporter from the US spread the news from Germany saying that 1,000 men actually put on a church on fire. Never happened. But actually, it's been reproduced so many times. And at the end, actually, when you, like, some people called the police and asked, okay, what's going on in Dortmund? They said, like, nothing, like a normal day of work. And here, 2022, now I missed the word, Bürgermeister, Council of Berlin, yes. She got an invitation from Klitschko. I don't know if you heard about it. She got an invitation to have an interview with Klitschko, so she met, she got ready, and then they started to talk. And from the beginning, Klitschko said very weird things, like very based disinformation content, and then they didn't realize for 23 minutes that it was a deep fake. So Giffey, the Council of Berlin, she wasn't speaking to Klitschko. She spoke actually to a deep fake. So this sees also the professional level, how it gets. And also it's a very good example because, of course, it's been discussed quite a lot in the media, but really to hear from the government, like, oops, maybe we should work on media literacy also internally, you never heard. I hope they can't hear me now. Yeah. There are 5 types of false information. Imposter content, which means like you use familiar names that are famous, you use photos or logos to show that it's true. Then there's satire, so kind of you go this humorous way. But you kind of, you hide it behind humor, but it's still something wrong. Then this is mainly happening in the false connection. So something is made based on headlines, images, or clickbait, very emotional, strong, and sensational. I hope you understood me. Then the false context, removing like the original information to another context, and then or adding a different one. And then, of course, the misleading content that you take, a selection of photos that you create, kind of an image that you would like to create. Yeah, how are messages actually circulating online? We probably, if I would ask you now, who of you saw already false, like disinformation on Facebook or on Instagram, a lot of people would agree. But the main part is we don't see it, actually. Mostly of the disinformation, they are on channels like Reddit. And from this, they kind of come to Telegram, for example. And then from Telegram, they go slowly to Twitter and TikTok, and then just to Facebook and Instagram. And then, but you see it slowly, they really influence the public debate in our societies. So the strategy is that people decide to speak out and to have an infiltration, which leads to polarization. Polarization leads to shift the discourse. And then, actually, and this is what is still amazed me when I work with young people, it's like, it kind of became normal to read disinformation. So there is a normalization happening that these misinformations are kind of part of our society nowadays. And this is actually a stage we reached we might shouldn't have. And then, of course, the end game will be that the discourse is taken and we talk about hijacking a discourse and turning it around. I have like 2 examples about disinformation campaigns in Germany that happened recently. So there's the case of Daniel. It's wrong, it's a fake information, it's a disinformation. I underline it again. So the claim was that a volunteer was beaten to death by Ukrainian refugees because he was a Russian-German person. Yeah, and it been shared, it was all over Germany, like in different kind of also media wrote about it. And then it didn't take long, they could figure out very quick that it was a disinformation because this never happened. Another example, it also shows how you can use videos or pictures from the past, was also quite going around in Germany, was like, here we see a supermarket in Regensburg. Regensburg is a small city in Bavaria. And that this supermarket is also selling Russian products. So people came and destroyed the whole supermarket. Surprisingly, it's of course a disinformation. So this video was taken in 2017, already somewhere in a small city in Russia. And they just took it out of the context, put it in, made up the whole lie about to know, with the goal of presenting that the West is the aggressor, and also to kind of have this turn between perpetrator and victims, you know? Yeah. I have 2 minutes left. Yeah, so when we talk about discrimination, we always have to think that there's most of the time a campaign behind. So the campaigns are actually what we observe in Germany now, discrimination campaigns against LGBT, discrimination against people who talk about the climate crisis. This is a big thing. Yesterday, I just read that in Spain, the Spanish government burned forests because they wanted to build this, like, you know, those wind wheels for new electricity. Of course, it's bullshit. And then what we also observe nowadays is discrimination against refugees and migrants campaigns. Yeah, I know that a lot of people probably work with young kids or with youngsters, so I thought I want to finish shortly with some impulse for daily work that might be helpful. So as I said in the beginning, you should talk with your class. Try to find always a time every day or like at least once a week to just listen to them. So, what is going on? Where are you actually online? Was there something you observed? Was there something that was interesting? Just like to pretend that to create a dialogue about the internet. Because we have to start kind of change this, like they are digital natives, of course, they are somehow working, like know what they're doing, but still we should show interest for this. Because then you can also try to talk about what do they observe, what do they find annoying, what is bothering them, and then also you can hear, is there maybe something like a disinformation they have read recently? Instead of pointing the fingers, it's always good to explain legal basics, talk about discrimination, educate about like right-wing extremist symbols, educate about disinformation, bullying, hate speech in the digital space, talk about strategies behind disinformation, and offer also support. This is a meme that was created from like one of the groups I work with. So they were, yeah. So it says like, oh, this is very emotional. So how about facts? Yes, memes are actually a very good approach to work with youngsters and pupils about disinformation. Because, for example, on disinformation, you have like terms like backfire effect. This means if people are already, they don't want to listen to the truth anymore. So this is what we call backfire event effect. And this is kind of one group, they made up this meme to explain it. Yeah, so when you talk about problems, always important also to talk about solutions. And then, which is always the most important, like try to become active together with the students. And they can actually become ambassadors, like telling their parents, for example, or in the school what they did. So this is, I'm going to quit now because I don't have time. Oh, maybe one more thing. So there are some methodological snacks, and if you want to learn more about methods of non-formal education, you can come to an online webinar. This is offering by us on the 26th of October, and it will be in English. So, yeah. And there, thank you. Dziękuję bardzo.
Can you stay? Charlotte, bardzo dziękujemy za tę...
Charlotte, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Charlotte.
Bardzo. Can we move forward? Okay. Bardzo dziękujemy za tę...
Thank you so much for this captivating presentation. Lots of expressions, lots of energy, and lots of sharing very interesting examples related to fake news. Do you have any questions, ladies and gentlemen? I don't see any questions, but I do have a question from an online user: how to teach students to distinguish between fake news and truth, since there are official services that actually spread fake news, official web pages.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is always I mean, it's not just about teaching them what is disinformation, what is fake news. It's also like showing them how actually media works, like also having different opinions, like also listen to each other, for example, if you have something that you don't agree. So actually the competence of information is so much more than just doing, for example, fact-checking. So I would say to find a balance in between, if, of course, I mean, it's like different in different countries, but for example, if wrong information are spread by state institution, it's always also possible to find on international fact-checking pages that that they're actually misleading and this is wrong content. So yeah.
Thank you.